Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today I've got a full tank review for you of the E75TS. This is a Tier 8 German premium heavy tank, although it feels a lot more like a medium as you're going to be seeing in the gameplay. This vehicle will be available on Friday inside Wargaming's loot boxes for 2019, and as of yet it remains to be seen whether this vehicle is going to also be available separately on release day, or if you're going to have to be able to gamble to get the tank. Irrelevant. I don't want to talk about the loot boxes. I don't want to talk about Wargaming's policy for selling this vehicle. I'm just going to try and review the vehicle today and let you know how it stacks up to some of its Tier 8 competition. So let's compare the E75TS to the Löwe, the iconic German heavy tank, and also the Renegade, the latest premium vehicle in the game. And you might be wondering, why are you comparing an E75TS to a Renegade? Well, you will see once you take a look at the statistics of this tank. So immediately, the E75TS has a 105mm gun, like all three of these vehicles. Although, as we can see, not all 105mm are equal, as the E75TS deals 360 alpha damage, a lot like the Renegade, which outperforms the Löwe. The damage per minute of this vehicle is right in between of the two vehicles that we're comparing it to, with 1,911 base. This is very decent for a heavy tank, although it's not incredible like it is on the Renegade, and that's because this vehicle fires 5.31 rounds a minute, over half a round less than the Renegade, but let's not forget that that is a better rate of fire than the Löwe, even though your alpha damage has also gone up from 320 to 360, and that's why you get that big old damage per minute boost. In the E75TS, I didn't really feel helpless when I was swarmed like I would be in a Löwe, although it does come at the expense of the penetration of the tank. It's 227 on its standard rounds, worse than the 234 that the Löwe has, but the E75's premium rounds have 282mm of penetration compared to the Löwe's 294, and the Renegade's 255. So wow, huge premium advantage for the E75TS over the Renegade, although it just pales in comparison to the Löwe's rounds. The shell velocity on the APCR rounds are great, a lot like on the Renegade, but just a little bit less than the Löwe. Now this tank carries 42 rounds of ammunition, more than enough to get the job done, and you'll be able to take a variety of armor-piercing, composite ridge, and high explosive rounds in this tank, although not nearly as much as you can in the Löwe. That thing has got more than enough ammunition to kill the enemy team multiple times over. So now let's move on to the gun handling. It's always interesting what the gun handling is going to be when you have a 105mm gun that just deals a little bit extra alpha damage. So it's the same as the Renegade with regards to aim time and accuracy at 0.38. So this means that the vehicle has a way better aim time than the Löwe does at 2.86, but its accuracy is much worse compared to the Löwe's at 0.33. Now the dispersion values on this tank are bizarre, and that's because it actually has different dispersion when it's moving as to when it's actually turning the tank. Usually those two things are linked, which means that when the E75 is driving in a straight line, that it's going to have its worst dispersion as to compared to when it turns its tank at 0.18 or its turret traverse at 0.1. And its tank traverse and its turret traverse dispersion is actually way better than the Löwe, and considering that you have better aim time as well, you're going to be able to snapshot a lot better in this tank, and considering you've got higher alpha damage than the Löwe, that's definitely going to be a step up. Although this tank is worse than the Renegade with regards to its gun handling because of the dispersion values. So this vehicle has 8 degrees of gun depression, not nearly as good as the Löwe and the Renegade, and so it does hold it back on a ridge line a little bit, and when I was playing this tank I quite often felt like I had to overexpose my hull armor, and especially my lower plate over a ridge line to really make it work, and so definitely take that into account. Furthermore, 15 degrees of gun elevation means this is limited, unlike the Löwe is, at engaging opponents that are above it, or when it's simply going down slope and it wants to shoot at the other side. So now on to mobility. And yeah, you can see why I'm comparing this to the Renegade. 45 forwards and 18 backwards. That is a ridiculously good reverse speed. 18 backwards for a German heavy tank means that you are incredibly nimble. Now, while this tank weighs 80 tons. It's a heavy girl. It also has a 1,280 horsepower engine, which means that its power to weight ratio is 16. Now, while that's not quite as good as the Renegade, you'll see that the terrain resistances of this vehicle are actually way better than the Renegade, which makes this thing feel way faster on all terrains than even the latest American heavy tank. Unfortunately, this gets balanced out a little bit with a poor turret traverse speed of 22 degrees a second and the tank traverse at 26, which is way worse than the Renegade, which means that when you are turning this vehicle and not just plowing in a straight line, then you will fall behind the American heavy tank, but you're going to be running rings round a Löwe, literally. So all of this weight has to go into some thick frontal armor, right? And, well, not entirely. It's more that this tank is just huge. It's a big tank. It's It's got 120 millimeters of frontal hull armor, 80 at the side and 80 at the rear, which looks way worse than the Lerva's hull armor and the Renegade's hull armor. And yeah, boys and girls, it really is. Even though this thing is heavy, it doesn't really pack very good armor at all. Its lower plate is 95 millimeters thick, and if you're not angling it at all, it's about 185 millimeters of effective armor. However, if you do angle the tank, then it goes up to about 210, which will reliably bounce lower tiered opponents and most equal tiered opponents. The upper plate, on the other hand, it's 120, and it's not that well angled. It's pretty well angled. Not angling it at all, 200 millimeters of effective armor. When you're angling the tank 220, it doesn't really get that much better. This thing is one of the easiest things to pen if you have premium rounds on a tier 8 and higher tank, although lower tier tanks are really going to struggle to be able to go through the front of this thing, even if it's not angling, even if they're firing gold. One thing that is lovely about the E75, as you saw with the introduction to this video, that it has some side skirts, and these count as actually 5 millimeters of space protection. And so if you over-angle your vehicle and you get hit by a high explosive round or a heat round, this will definitely help. And quite a few times while I was playing this vehicle, an artillery shell hit me flush in the side, and it did maybe 100 or 200 damage. It definitely did a fantastic job of absorbing, a lot like a high explosive round will do into the tracks. So while this definitely makes up for the vehicle's rather low side armor of 80 millimeters, it doesn't really make up for it as well, because the Renegade, while it has 76 millimeters of side hull armor, has a boat shape, and so you can over-angle it. If you over-angle 80 millimeters of armor, if you over-angle it on the E75 TS, it's still going to go right through your tank. Look at this, 120, 130 millimeters angled like this. It doesn't really feel like a German heavy tank with regards to that. However, the turret on this tank, whoa, I love it. I love the turret on this vehicle. It's thick, 300 millimeters at the side of the turret, will bounce all but tier 10 premium rounds. The mantlet is huge and will absorb a lot of punishment, and the cupola on top is actually quite a tricky thing to hit, especially because there's, I guess, a viewport up here. I don't know what that is on the top of the tank. Somebody let me know in the comments down below. But it does a mighty fine job of actually blocking some of the damage that will be going on to hit your cupola. And so the E75 TS, when you get this thing hull down, it's actually a bit of a monster with that turret armor of 230, and I'd say turret armor wise, it actually does feel better than the Lerva, although it is a big turret and quite easy to hit if you're trying to avoid people poking high explosive rounds at you. So to go with this all-round armor, the vehicle has 1,500 hit points. Not really what you would expect of a big German tank like this, but it's kind of a balancing mechanic of the vehicle. And 390 meters view range, this is definitely important. 10 meters view range on this vehicle means that you definitely have to take coated optics on this tank, whereas on the Lerva or the Renegade, if you have an exceptionally skilled crew and you're willing to use a premium consumable like chocolate or cola, you can probably get away with using vents on the tank. But you know what? I think that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's take this tank out for a triple helping of gameplay today. So firstly, we're rolling out on Ensk, not the best matchup. Tier 8 and Tier 9 tanks against us, but on the other hand, Ensk, what a map for a heavy tank, right? And just look at the speed of this vehicle. That's a guard. That's a medium tank, a Soviet medium tank in front of us. And look, we're pretty much overtaking that tank. We're up to 43 kilometers an hour forwards. As I said, in a straight line, this thing is phenomenal. The speed of it, it really does feel like it's more of an E50 TS, if I'm honest. It definitely doesn't feel like an E75 down at Tier 8 with regards to its mobility. There aren't too many super fast German heavy tanks. As Wargaming's favorite word when they use to describe tanks is dynamics. And I finally figured out that when they say dynamics, they obviously mean like a dynamic tank, like a tank that's able to get around quickly. It makes sense, and I would actually use this word when I'm choosing to describe the E75. It is a very dynamic tank. It's able to get around, it's able to use its mobility. The reverse speed of this vehicle cannot be overstated with how delicious it is. It's an absolutely fantastic reverse speed, and being able to go backwards at 18 makes one of the German specialities of having that good reverse speed even better. When I'm playing in my Maus or I'm playing in my E100, I absolutely love going backwards at 15. It allows me to stop my opponents from being able to get my flanks, and with the E75 TS, it's even better. You can really stop your opponents from being able to get your side and outmaneuver them, or even just pull back over a ridgeline or get yourself into cover very easily. This combined with decent alpha damage, combined with okay gun handling on the tank, and you really do feel like you have a more mobile, responsive, heavy vehicle. If you are the kind of player who just can't really get into heavy tanks because they feel a little bit too slow for you, or you've always wanted to have a German heavy tank that's just a little bit faster and able to get around, then yeah, this might be the vehicle for you. And there we go, classic. We're taking out last year's loot box reward vehicle with, I guess, this year's loot box reward vehicle. But I wonder if people are going to see the E75 TS as a little bit of a consolation prize when what they're really going to be wanting to get is going to be getting that new double-barrel tank, right? Anyway, I'm jumping the gun there. Hopefully I'm going to be able to review that tank for you soon. And if I can't tomorrow, then you know it's going to be coming up on Friday. Alright, so we found ourselves in an interesting position here. 2 artilleries to shoot at and not just 1. I decided to shoot for the one that I felt was furthest away from me, try and lock them down because I thought that that one had the most mobility and would be able to escape, whereas the GW Tiger in that position, he's not going anywhere. So while we track the M5355, the M5355 scurries away, and we're going to get forwards as quickly as we can to see if we can put a round into the GW Tiger. And up to 1,200 damage, it definitely hasn't been my finest game yet so far. But, you know, this is just classic E75 TS. You know, you want to push forwards. Well, the tank isn't classic yet. I mean, it's not even released yet. What I'm saying is this is classic Ensk for a heavy tank, and especially a heavy tank like a Patriot. Or a tank like the Renegade, where you can really make use of your mobility to be able to get forwards as quickly as you can to be able to re-engage your opponents. Ensk fights are close quarters. Ensk fights are very fast. And a vehicle like this, it's far better to be in a tank like this than to be in a slower, heavy tank. Alrighty then, so we managed to cut our way through the eastern flank. Now we're going to surround our enemies and hopefully stop them from being able to take our cap circle. And right now, this looks like this could be the dream cleanup for a vehicle like this. It doesn't really feel like an 80-ton tank, this. It's incredibly good for ramming, as we might see a couple of times throughout the video today, or at least as I was showing off on my stream yesterday of this tank. Alright, so the 112 comes around the corner. We put a clean round in there, also tracking the 112. And you'll see that I'm trying to bait him into shooting my turret. I'm even putting my mantlet round a little bit. I'm going to try and find a shot there through the tracks. We're unable to get one in. And right now I'm thinking, shall we load high explosive rounds? And I'm trying to bait him more and more into shooting my vehicle. He refuses to do so, so he comes around and puts a shot right into my lower plate. And now we're just going to bully this 112. Look how we can push this Chinese tank around. We can just absolutely shove this tank around. I don't even really see him as a threat now, if I'm honest with you. He doesn't seem to be aiming particularly well. He kind of choked that one into my track. I'm more interested in maybe dealing with the Panther II. So I decide to track the Panther II. The 112 again manages to put a shell into my tracks. I want to kill that Panther II, and then hopefully I can manage to ram kill this 112. But my little shunts were not enough to be able to finish off the Tier 8 Chinese heavy tank. Just didn't really feel like he was a threat there. I wanted to deal with the Panther II, shut down the artillery, get up behind the ST1. But oh, a disaster. Just as I repair my gun on my track there, the Oh-Ho puts a round into me that makes it so that I am ammo-racked, and so my reload is awful, and so we're unable to get our revenge and finish off the Oh-Ho. Still, not a bad result. I'll take 4,000 damage in exactly 5 minutes for our first game in this Tier 8 German heavy tank. But let's jump into some more gameplay. So this time, all Tier 8 matchmaking on Malinovka Encounter, and unfortunately there are 2 self-propelled guns on the enemy team. So what did I want to do this game? I wanted to use the speed of the E75 TS, that wonderful 16 horsepower per ton ratio, in conjunction with the incredible ground resistances this vehicle has to get up the hill quickly, to take pole position at the windmill to be able to avoid the enemy artillery. So we're just going to pace our way up here. We're going to be able to hopefully engage this Panther II on the move, only having to stop for maybe a couple of seconds there to be able to put a great starting round into a Tier 8 German medium tank. While we get spotted, just look at what our competition is here. T-44 has made it up the top of the hill. The ISM is still trying to climb. The Guard maybe stopped to try to shoot some tanks. The Emil, we were neck and neck with the Emil. In fact, we were probably in front of the Emil while we were making our way up here. And really, the first person who can get to the windmill just has such a huge advantage in these kind of artillery games. If you can get to the windmill first, you can use it to align up with the artillery, which is this play, to spot the enemies as they crest over the ridgeline, and hopefully your artillery will do things like this that they did to the AMX-65T. If you can get the enemies to camp here, while you are sitting behind the windmill, then it's almost going to be an assured victory. However, what the enemies will need to do is to not actually sit here, not take lots of artillery fire, and to push forwards as aggressively they can to retake the windmill, to use it to be able to go hull down against vehicles there. So I spot out the Emil in the open, and I decide that I'm not going to get my ambush shot off. I was really hoping that somebody was going to come with their turret to the side, or maybe just expose some kind of weak turret there, and I'll be able to get a quick shot. But I'm still doing what I need to do. I'm side-scraping out. I'm shooting hull armor now, Panther 2, that's the second round we've put into that tank. And the Emil decides to shoot us in the track. I don't want to use my repair kit right now. I don't really feel like the need is there. But the Panther 2 actually manages to put a round into my cupola. So nice job, Panther 2, showing that he's got some good marksmanship. But we're hitting him just so much harder than he's hitting us. The Emil launches another shell at our vehicle, and I put another round into the upper hull of the Panther 2 there, showing you really who is winning this tier 8 German fight. But of course a tank like this is going to when you've put yourself in a superior position and you're side-scraping against your opponents. I fire a round there into the AMX 65T's cupola, and we're already up to 1,700 damage. We're avoiding the artillery splashes, although the same can't be said for the Emil to my side, and the tier 8 German heavy tank on the enemy team is now firing high explosive rounds at us. Now, he actually shoots at our turret, and he doesn't shoot our side skirts. I was really hoping he was going to shoot our side skirts there, but still, for him to do 245, that's never really going to win him the game. Especially when we put 373 in his tank. So you can see that the engine grunt in this tank really surprises people when you're able to get forwards. We just rushed forwards and it put pressure on the Indian Panzer. What looked like it was going to be an easy shot into a heavy tank was actually not an easy shot into a heavy tank, purely because of the mobility that this vehicle has. Now the Emil tries to come around the corner again, and I'm getting some really good assistance fire from our artillery, who is saying they're going to communicate, well, they're communicating with me, saying they're going to hit the Indian Panzer. Now, I just want to try and focus the Emil or focus the VK. The artillery splashes the Indian Panzer, so that's one less tank that we're going to have to worry about. I actually have a terrible shot there. It goes low. First bad shot of the game, and the AMX gets an advantage against me, doing 357 damage to my vehicle. Disaster for me. Luckily, he bounces his additional shot. I tried to find a shell into the VK, but I wasn't quite able to find his lower plate, and he puts 122 damage into our side skirts there. That's not a great result. Look at that splash on the side skirts. Really awesome to see that inside World of Tanks. So I'm hoping maybe we can get rid of the AMX, but again, I rush the shot, and I'm unable to penetrate the top of the tank. I was really thinking that the APCR rounds, and I am firing gold now, would have been able to handle that tank. And now I'm in an awkward situation, but again, artillery helps me get out of trouble by finishing off the AMX. Oh, I turn my tank a little bit to try and side scrape against the VK, and it ends up with the Emil going through my thin side armor. But now I know that the VK has fired at the T-44 to the side of me, and I'm going to have the better rate of fire than he does with that large caliber German gun. Then I'm easily going to be able to put 2 shells into him, finish him off, and then hopefully stop this Emil from cresting the side. Look at that reverse speed, able to get back. He misses a shot. He screws up a shot there into the side of the windmill, and hopefully I'm able to side scrape now to be able to put a bit of punishment into him. Or maybe I don't need to. Maybe I can just go forwards. He's not aiming at me. A quick look at that. Clutch one into the side of his tank and then pull back. And wow, look at this graveyard that we have created, boys and girls. This was a fight. This was World of Tanks, right? We used our mobility to be able to get forwards, to take the most important location, and we fought to hold it. And that has allowed our team to be able to come out on top. And it's a blooming good thing that we managed to take the hill as well, because for some reason we've had lots of tanks dying in other locations as well, even though we've only lost 1 tank by the looks of it that's actually died on top of the hill. So from here on 6 hit points, not really too much more happens. I managed to finish off one of the enemy vehicles. I put a shot into one of the artillery, and you'll see that we do come through with the victory in the post-game stats. But to save you just sitting here watching me snipe out, let's go check out another game. Alright, so now we're going to be playing on Karelia. We're defending against an assault, and again, not the best possible matchup. I do have so many games in this tank where I was just absolutely nailing tier 6 and tier 7 tanks. This vehicle performs admirably, as you would expect. It's just an incredible tank when you're in a very good matchup. But I wanted to show you also some of the weaknesses of the vehicle and some of the struggles that I had inside the tank. Number 1, don't drive like a donkey. Did you see how close I drove to the enemy team there? What was I thinking? That I was going to go spot out? That I was maybe going to try and go down into the dip? Consequently, I just lost nearly half of my hit points right at the start of this battle. Brutal stuff. Should not have driven so close to people, and you'll immediately see that the side armor on this vehicle, don't expect it to be incredible just because it's got some space protection. This will help you against heat rounds, and it will help you against high explosive rounds. This shield is not going to protect you against a reckless play. And sometimes I did find in this tank that I did make quite reckless plays because of the speed. You can get yourself into trouble in this vehicle. Trust me. I'm going to follow it up with, I've got another replay on this tank that I'm not going to put inside the tank review. It's quite a long one, and I think it almost justifies a video within its own right. But you can use that mobility to be able to get yourself into trouble. and then you just don't have that thick hull armor to be able to get yourself out of it sometimes. What I would recommend in this vehicle is use the mobility to get yourself into a frontal engagement. That is exactly what you need to do. Get yourself into a frontal engagement, keep it there, and use the ridgeline and more of your mobility to hopefully be able to keep the pressure up on the enemy to be able to engage them. One thing I actually failed to mention inside the armor review of this vehicle, and I must highlight this fact, I'm going to pause the video now just for a sec. Pause the replay now, I can't pause the video, it's an eternal thing, to show you something on the side of the tank. Do you see how the side of this vehicle actually has a bit of a bow in the center, where obviously the turret is along the hull? This is actually really annoying for when you're side scraping in this tank. If you side scrape in this vehicle, of course, the whole of the side will be angled apart from, yeah, you guessed it, this part here. If the enemies hit this area, a lot like on a Panzer VII or on the FV215B, for example, it can be a significant weakness on the tank. And while it is thicker than the rest of the hull armor, it's definitely not 80 millimeters thick. Wargaming have seen to improving that. Definitely keep that in mind, that sometimes when you are side scraping this vehicle, if you wonder how did that manage to penetrate, quite often it does hit that kind of bow on the middle part of the hull. Alright, so I've decided to continue to push here, because there's only one artillery on the enemy team. And I think, why not? Why not just keep trying to use the advantages that this tank has against my opponents? It's basically like a heavy medium tank really at tier 8. And while it's definitely not going to do incredible in every situation, it's been doing far from terrible in all of the games that I've been showing today by actually taking the speed, by using that speed I should say, to take the important flanks and to take the fight to the enemy team. Alright, so Rheinmetall and a Scorpion right in front of us here. We bounced the shell. That was a regular shell from the Scorpion G. We put one round into them. We reload a high explosive round. I'm thinking, who do I want to shoot right now? Yeah, I'm going to go for the Borsig. Oh, ho, ho, ho. 440 damage. What is the high explosive damage on this tank? It's 440. Wow, I literally rolled completely average there. But you could roll as high as 500 with these rounds. And they are very good high explosive rounds, and there is a good point of taking enough of them for when you get into those very awkward hull down fights against opponents that just don't want to expose their weaker hull armor. As you should do. You shouldn't expose your weaker hull armor, right? But what I'm saying is the HE rounds on this tank were fantastic, and with that great space armor protection down the side as well, you can do some good work with them. Alright, well that definitely wasn't a high explosive round. We managed to finish off the UDES with a penetration on the hull there. But just look at what the HE shell did to him anyway. 175? That's kind of half of the alpha damage that we would have done to him if we'd been firing a regular round. So yeah, great HE on this tank against those lightly armored targets that can prove to be a little bit pesky. And when you've got that .38 accuracy, it's definitely not the best sniper in the world. That's why you're seeing me try and get into these frontal engagements, try and get to these close quarter combat scenarios. That's the best place to take your tanks with these poor accuracy. I would play this tank a lot like a Patriot. I obviously would play this tank like a Renegade because it's basically a German Renegade is what I'm really feeling about this vehicle the more that I play it. But a Patriot is a very comparable tank. While the Patriot will have those extra degrees of gun depression, I would never argue that the Patriot has the better turret, but it's by far the smaller tank. It's much smaller. You're able to hide its armor behind a lot more smaller objects. And also, this tank, while it's okay for side scraping out, it's very hard to hide this hull if you manage to get caught out in the open. It's such an easy tank to hit, as we saw at the start with the T-28 prototype putting 2 early rounds into us. Alright, well we're going to continue to advance through here, and oh dear, what's happened to the T-55 on the enemy team? The T-55A is called We Come in Peace. Well, I'm sorry, mate. I'm not coming in peace. I'm coming for your hit points. I'm coming for those credits. I'm coming for the experience, bud. We caught him out, shut him down, and hopefully now we can get up to be able to spot some of the tank destroyers. As General Sonic on my team in the Lerva says, LOL! Okay, yeah, it was quite funny. It's always funny when you see reward vehicles, especially the harder ones to get, like the T-55A. It's always very humanizing and in a humiliating way, right? When you manage to see that even awesome players who can unlock those tricky to unlock tanks still making mistakes. I mean, I should talk about it. I do it all the time on my streams, and I should definitely try to put together a collection of clips of my fails for the YouTube channel as well. That would be 10 out of 10. Well, maybe it wouldn't. Maybe they would be awful. Who knows? Anyway, 5 kills in this game. We're rocking it. And now we've managed to get into a position when other heavy tanks are lacking. WZ-111-14 made it round the back. The Lerva has been trundling probably across the marshy terrain as quickly as possible. And this is really where I think this tank is absolutely stellar as a good credit maker. You've got the mobility to be able to get up the slope to avoid the second shot from the 257. But more importantly, it was the mobility that this tank had to be able to get through that swamp quickly, to get into the position, to spot the enemy tanks, to track the enemy tanks, to be able to mop up credits and experience at the end of the game. And that, ladies and gents, is where this tank is great. It's really the mobility that makes this vehicle. It's definitely not the hull armor. This gun is definitely lacking for a vehicle. I'm not saying that this gun is bad. There's no way that you could ever claim that the gun on the E75 TS is bad. It's not. But the gun doesn't really make up for the armor. If this thing didn't have the mobility, the tank would be rather poor. But because the vehicle does have the mobility, it's actually a pretty gnarly tank. Is it like a classic Lerva? I would never consider that this tank is like a classic Lerva, boys and girls. This is still the tank if you don't want to use the mobility, where you want to have better upper hull armor, where you want to have a smaller, and in my opinion, more often than not, more dependable turret. The cupola on this vehicle is probably a little bit more prominent, but it's a bit more tricky to hit. But this thing has the gun. It definitely doesn't have the wild damage per minute, but it has the penetration and it has the accuracy to be dependable. That's definitely something that the E75 TS is not. The E75 TS is definitely not dependable. But this wild child of Tier 8 German heavy tanks definitely justifies its position in the game. And yeah, when you look at the tank like this, it basically looks like an absolute chunky Panzer IV Schmaltern. Yeah, the more that I think about it, the more that that's pretty much what that is. You take a Panzer IV Schmaltern and you turn it into a Renegade or a Patriot, and that's what the E75 TS is. So our first round on Ensk, a high caliber for the 4,127 damage that we dealt and 1,424 base experience with 150k profit, although quite a lot of that was because I was using a credit booster while I was testing this tank out. Next up, a steel wall on Malinovka with our side scraping. We actually blocked 3,000 damage that game. We managed to survive, pick up another kill to secure that ace tanker for the 1,360 base, and we did fire a few more premium rounds this game, but we still made a very decent profit indeed. And next up on Karelia, have you ever seen a heavy tank really go that far that quickly? We traveled 2.5 kilometers, which is definitely not bad inside a 6-minute round. Again, ace tanker, top gun, kamikaze for ram killing the object 704. We blocked enough, we still had some hit points left at the game, and it doesn't look like that .38 accuracy really held us back, and we made a very decent profit, as we didn't look like we fired any premium rounds this round. So the E75 TS, I played this tank at Gamescom, I enjoyed it there, but I really enjoyed playing it recently when I was more relaxed and in my home environment and I could really focus on the gameplay of the vehicle. It's a great tank. It's basically like a German Renegade or even a German Patriot. It'll definitely be for somebody out there who wants to play a faster German heavy tank, and really, to all intents and purposes, this is kind of what I feel that a Panther II should feel like in World of Tanks. Now, while I've already announced that this vehicle is going to be available in the loot boxes that will be released on Friday, as of yet, there's no confirmation that this is going to be a loot box exclusive, and I'm praying that Wargaming are going to make this available outside of the loot boxes, because I think it's possibly the most deplorable thing that a company could ever do to introduce new content into the game that forces players to be able to gamble to get it. So Wargaming, please, I really hope that this tank is going to be available for this sounds outrageous, the fair price of 40 euros. Please just let us buy the tank individually outside the loot boxes. Don't make us gamble to be able to get new content. Is it not enough that we already pay $40, $50, $60 for your new content? But again, I'm going to wait for Friday for the final confirmation before I make my statement about that. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was the E75 TS tank review. Hope you enjoyed it, or maybe it was just useful for you. If it was, give the video a thumbs up, but if you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you want to get my upcoming Object 703 double-barrel tank review first. And let me know what you think about the E75 TS. Do you think the vehicle looks absolutely incredible, or do you think the fact that the armor is definitely not invincible frontally, like you will be in many heavy tanks, detracts from the vehicle, and the gun and the mobility doesn't really make up for that, and you might as well be playing a medium tank. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.